Brodman, I want to start with you about the hypocrisy of the Labor Party that I mentioned up front. Climate emergency! But has it changed anything about their behaviours when it comes to a climate emergency? No, they'll keep flying. They'll keep turning up to the Chairman's Club. They'll take a flight tomorrow when Parliament shuts down. They'll take another one when Parliament's coming back on Sunday. Then they'll take another one next Thursday. And effectively, they'll just laugh at the rest of us.
Well, Paul, it's a subterfuge. First of all, the Greens wanted to move the motion. They weren't going to agree with the Greens, so they thought they'd put up their own. But really, it is a screen because they don't have a policy of their own. The last election was an election on climate change, and the sensible Australian people said, no thanks. We want cheaper electricity, we want sensible policies, and you, the Labor Party, were only offering us transition into poverty. And now they're in a situation where they've got half of them who want to say, oh, we've got to stick with 45%, and the other half, led by Joel Fitzgibbon, who suffered a huge swing against him, where One Nation got 20% of his vote on primaries, where he's saying, oh, well, why don't we agree with the Liberal Party target? Well, the bottom line is we need to have a stable system of electricity where people can have manufactures, where people can have jobs. That was our only competitive advantage we used to have. And the ridiculous policies we've had of subsidising intermittent power, which is non-reliable and depends on a solid base of base load, simply has put so much of manufacturing out of business. So today was a farce. Of course they'll fly around as much as they want. Of course, socialists always do have the attitude, this is what we do, we'll only require the rest of the people to abide by the things that we put out there in front. It's just a nonsense, and of course it's hypocrisy.
Yeah, Stephen, when the Shadow Climate Change Minister has flown 47 times this year, Albo will, of course, hide behind the idea of, well, I'm the leader and I need to float about the country and it's a big joint and it's too hard to walk. It is a little bit difficult to then simultaneously declare climate emergency where the language behind that term would mean things like regular commercial aviation would become far less frequent for people to be able to access. That is the definition of hypocrisy. But more importantly, you've had a clear head since the election. You've said that they need to realise that Australia is not obsessed with the language of the Greens, let alone the language of Extinction Rebellion. What do you think about what this party's done and the clear hypocrisy that I've just shown tonight about the people who are pushing it?
On the point in terms of the number of flights, I think your rhetoric's a little overblown, Paul. That's not to defend the fact that people need to, in doing their job, make these flights. They regularly have to make these flights. To go to Canberra from far-flung places, they have to make these flights. So I can't agree with what I think is you pulling together a couple of strands and trying to turn it into the hypocrisy argument, where I think I absolutely agree with you.
Sorry, 47 times is not Mark Butler flying from Adelaide to Canberra. I've got the list of every single place he went. Would you like me to read them to you?
I'm quite sure if you pulled out my flights, you'd find that I actually travelled all over the country, just like you're in Alice Springs tonight,
Sure, but
Paul,
you didn't vote for a climate emergency, Stephen. That's my point.
No.
But that's my point. My point is that I understand
accept your point.
That
You're pulling together something that I don't think you need to do to show the stupidity of letting the Greens wag the Labor dog, the Greens' tail wag the Labor dog. We made that mistake in the last election. I've said it a number of times on air and to you privately, the pro-climate change position only got 43% of the vote. The anti or the less concerned about climate change position got 57% of the vote. It is unambiguous. Labor cannot allow itself, like it did on Adani, to be driven by the Greens. And from what you've described today, that they felt that they had to out-green the Greens or they could be embarrassed by a Greens motion when they get to that stage, and I've been in that position for 20 years when I was in the Parliament, where the Greens just move these meaningless motions that are just about expressing their views with never having to actually do anything. And let's be very clear about the Greens. They sabotaged Labor in 2009 by voting down an emissions trading scheme that they could have had. But they were more interested in waving flags and protesting and carrying on than actual policy. So for Labor still in 2019 to be letting the Greens wag the dog, they are never going to be able to regain the confidence of a majority of the Australian public if they are seen to be following the Greens. They need to really have a hard conversation among themselves about that. Joel Fitzgibbon's having that conversation, and I know Anthony Albanese is having that conversation. Labor will have to take a new policy to the next election. They should knuckle down, start working out...
But he's kind of boxing himself, isn't he, when he turns around and votes, Gary, for things like a climate emergency, to take on the language of the hysterics. That's what they've voted for now. So if they deliver anything in the next 3 years going into the next election that is anything short of the demands of climate emergency, they cause trouble for the people who push themselves to that point. That's what I'm talking about tonight, let alone the fact that Sarah Hanson-Young, let's go through that one again, that Sarah Hanson-Young wasn't and isn't the leader of the Greens, but she's taken 58 flights this year. The leader of the Greens has taken 44, and they lecture us about freaking climate change.
I think she had to go and do a bit of whale watching, didn't she? I mean, you make the point very well, Paul, and I'm very pleased to see that Stephen's agreeing with me. He said they have to rethink their policy. They haven't got a hope in Hades. Then at the last election was a vote on climate change, and the people who want decent, cheap electricity and don't want these extreme green policies, green Labor policies, won. And they're still trying to come to terms with that.
All right, Gary, get in there, mate.
Yeah, Paul, look, I think they're doing a terrific job. I hope Mark Butler gets up every day. I hope Christina Keneally gets up every day. I hope Sarah Hanson-Young gets up every day. They're doing a terrific job. Don't give them any ideas, Paul. Look, what they really essentially moved was a motion that the Labor Party wants to lose the next 3 elections. They've basically moved a motion that said, we don't give a stuff what the average Australian thinks. We are the elite. We know best. We're going to drive up your power prices. And by the way, the cost of you getting on a plane with us, because business class is going to be the first 10 or 15 rows by the time we're finished, because it's only going to be those who want the silver service, who can afford to go on a plane. I mean, mate, this is the vision these numpties want. And that's what they are trying to con us on. And let's just know that it is a con. Every aspect of this is a con. Let's keep calling it out for what it is. You know, if the Labor Party at 100 and something or other years of age, and happy birthday to the Liberal Party, Menzies' child turned 75 today. God bless the Liberal Party's efforts over those 75 years. But if the Labor Party really seriously believe they are a party for a future, not just simply a party that's completely controlled by the history and the past, and those who actually put real effort in on behalf of real working Australians. If the Labor Party really believed in working Australians, they would turn their back on this stuff. You never vote for somebody else's stunt. They'd be better off saying, you know what, Palaszczuk, build some bloody dams in Queensland. Stop delaying the passing on of funds for things like the Brisbane Metro. Stop playing politics with the federal funds for infrastructure. Let's get Australian workers, working farmers, getting their water. Let's get these real things happening. But no, that's not what we're hearing from Labor. So they're stuffed for the next decade the way they're going right now.